Well, for more, I'm joined also on set by France 24's Shirli Sitbon from our International Affairs Desk. Shirli, first of all, tell us more about the 4 Israeli hostages and the 200 Palestinian prisoners that are set to be exchanged later today.
Well, we've been seeing the faces of these 4 hostages, 4 soldiers. You know, they were taken from an observation site, and actually they're probably going to return to Israel through the same area where they were abducted on that day, taken on that day by Hamas. We've been seeing their faces of these women. Other women who were there with them were killed on that day of October 7. And, well, we've seen the image of one of them, Naama Levi. You know, she was with a trainer. We saw some blood on her clothes, and their images have been there from the beginning. When we talk about the Palestinian prisoners who will be released, not the same profiles as last week, as in the first swap. Last week were women and minors. This week, and they returned to their homes. And this week, we're talking about, and we're seeing the images as they develop, of the Red Cross meeting with Hamas and starting this swap. And the Palestinian prisoners who will be released, now they're probably looking at all the details. You know that last week it was basically when they took the hostages, they had to identify, make sure that they were the people who were supposed to be returned. So the process is ongoing. As far as the Palestinian prisoners, then we know that the ones who will be released today, they have, for 120 of them, life imprisonment sentences. And they're people who committed attacks, both from Hamas, the Islamic Jihad, and also from the Al-Aqsa Brigade, which are affiliated with Fatah. But they're not the most notorious prisoners. And 70 of them will be expelled from the area, probably to Egypt, and others will be taken to the Gaza Strip.
Now, we're seeing in those images, those live images there from Palestine Square in Gaza, what appears to be officials from representatives from the Red Cross signing documents alongside Hamas. Do we know what's going on there, what they're signing?
We know that now we're seeing them moving along. We know that it's the transfer. The Red Cross has taken the responsibility of taking those women. They got to this meeting point. And now they will be, the hostages will be transferred, given to the Red Cross, identified, and taken to a meeting point with the Israeli army later along. We saw last week a scene that was a bit more chaotic, but the hostages who will be released are not there yet. So yes, we'll see if it goes the way it was last week, or if it will be organized in a different way. Yes, so now we can see still the Red Cross being filmed by Hamas militant who has been using these images to show that they're in control of the area and of the process. And so now they've been, of course, airing these images. We can see that the Red Cross is moving along and trying to speed this up so everything is done properly, and so it gets hold of the hostages and can complete this process and bring them to the Israeli army. Of course, we can't know everything that is being said right now between the Red Cross and Hamas. Basically, the process, it's not an easy one, because often the hostages are held in different areas of the Gaza Strip. They need to be brought. And now, yes, the whole process is being discussed, all the last elements. We can see that the Red Cross men are now leaving. So I guess they will be moving along with the convoy, getting the hostages and trying to reach Netzarim, this access, and bringing the Israeli hostages home to complete this. But we're still in the early stage. You know that last week it was later along. We can see all the crowd there. But this is just a shot that takes this area. We saw last week that actually when you looked further away, there weren't that many people in the area where the process was being held. And last week was a bit later. Hamas insisted that this week the process is held earlier, and wanted to complete this by noon.
And do we know at this stage where the Palestinian prisoners are?
We can see them. We can see the hostages.
That's, I believe, 2 Israeli hostages from what I can see.
You can see those images less chaotic than last week. You can see Daniela Gilboa. You can identify Liri Albag. Karina Ariev is there as well. Well, moving on stage, this is something that didn't happen last week. They're looking confident. We heard that in previous swaps, they were asked to be smiling and to show confidence as something that Hamas asked them to do. We don't know. These are images, but this is part of a communication campaign as well. That is seems to be clearly what's happening now. So the 4 hostages now still in the hands of Hamas, but basically on the stage. This is the first time it's organized in this way. The 4 of them seem in good health, that's obvious. But the smiles, of course, are part of the Hamas process here. We'll know more about it probably later on today when they are released for good. So we can see Nama Levi there at the left, on the left, the one who had blood on her trainer, on her pants when she was abducted. Then Liri Albag just in front of her.
I think it's worth noting there the brown bags they're holding. We've been hearing reports that they're goodie bags of sort, but this is just a rumor. Do we know at all what they are bringing home with them?
This is basically part of this campaign by Hamas, which tries to show itself as both being in control, being not an extremist group, not a terrorist organization, but just an armed group there trying to convince everyone it's moderate. It's showing that the hostages are in good health, that they're smiling. That's basically showing the world that what they want to see is not the moments of the abduction, not the fact that they killed their colleagues who were there on the observation site, unarmed. On that day, the hostages were soldiers at the time, of course, who were 19 at the time, most of them now 20. But Hamas wants to show these images for the public to remember these images of their release in good health. And we're seeing this with them smiling on stage, obviously something that Hamas probably planned. But now the Red Cross vehicles and convoy will probably are about to leave and to join the Israeli army, which will identify what they've been. We can identify them ourselves, but they will see if they're in good health and take them to Israel, to their families. Again, through the same site where they were abducted more than 15 months ago.
Now, mediators, hope that the 6-week truce between Israel and Hamas, which began last weekend, could, lay the foundation for a permanent end to the war in Gaza. So far, things seem to be going according to plan, but is it too early to be optimistic?
Yes, well, this is a second phase, second week, which is beginning and which seems to be going according to plan. Of course, many are wondering and are not, maybe they can see the 6 weeks moving along, but the second phase will be more complicated. Negotiations will begin in a few days as we see the Red Cross convoys moving along. We see flags. We saw several Palestinian flags, but also Hamas flags. And this area where Hamas brought its activists, we know that it has managed to recruit several thousand new fighters since the beginning of the war to replace the ones who were killed. So it's maybe not as strong, but it's still strong, and it shows that it's still in control there. It was not replaced by another Palestinian force, not a civilian force that would be able to take over with the help of the international community, but Hamas seems very much there and showing that today. Now, maybe in weeks to come, as the profiles of the Palestinian prisoners released will be, better known to people with the memories of various attacks they had carried out, maybe there'll be more protests against this. But for now, the Israeli public is very much behind this deal, Hamas as well. The Palestinians want the ceasefire to continue. They don't want to live these bombings. They want to return to their homes and rebuild. That's the population, of course. Hamas has its own tactics, but it is facing criticism from the Palestinian people of Gaza who do not want the war to resume.
And Shirley, could you please just briefly recap, just remind us what the first phase of the ceasefire deal entails?
Well, the main thing, there are several things. Of course, the fighting has to stop, and it has stopped. The bombings of Hamas position, the fighting, the Hamas firing rockets towards Israel, that has stopped largely. Then there's the humanitarian aid, the Palestinians' lack of everything, and we've seen hundreds and hundreds of trucks getting in last every day, trying to reach the population, which has not been getting enough food, water. So that's the first phase. Then, of course, what we're seeing now is the swap, the release of 33 Israeli hostages, and the release of Palestinian prisoners, 30 for every civilian, 50 for every soldier, and that's why today 200 are being released. Of course, their families anticipating their return, but 70 of them will not go back to the West Bank. They will be brought to other countries, probably Egypt, and others will be taken to Gaza, to the Gaza Strip, where they will be free, therefore, but not to the West Bank. The process seems to have been completed this stage, at least. The Red Cross convoy is gone from the square, and the people are now seeing that this will continue. We see not only Hamas fighters with their flags, but also a crowd. We don't know who's there exactly, and we don't know how many people. The shot is just on this, the camera is filming this part of the square. We don't know how many people are there, but this phase has gone along. We saw that the 4 hostages earlier on, 4 soldiers were now on their way to the Israeli army, to a meeting point with the Israeli army.
I think it's just worth noting, we can see some destruction there in the background, destruction of the buildings. If I remember correctly, the reconstruction plan is set to be launched in the 3rd phase of the deal, but it seems like an enormously daunting task, doesn't it? I mean, it seems very far away, and is it even feasible?
It's very far away. It will be feasible, but for how many years? It will take such a long time. The UN said last week that up to 90% of housing units in the Gaza Strip have been destroyed. And we see that one of the priorities in these very days, from the beginning of this deal, of the humanitarians in the West Bank, is to try at least repair and build shelters for people who don't have anything, who basically, we're seeing tents above the rubble. We've been seeing that in recent days. And yes, so shelters first, then rebuilding. The international community will help. Various Arab countries have put money there, of saying that they vowed to stay there and to help rebuild Gaza. And of course, that's the will of the Gazan population, to see their homes being rebuilt. But of course, it's such a traumatic war. And now we're not in that phase. We're in the phase where they're returning to their hometowns. And, many people are still, thousands are unaccounted for. So yes, it's a long, long road ahead.
And we know that more aid has been trickling in to Gaza since the ceasefire began last weekend. Do we know if, it's going to be nowhere near enough to meet the needs of the Gazan population, but do we know if any of this aid, this new aid, is reaching the population at all?
It's reaching it far better than before, because when the fighting was ongoing, the UN and various humanitarian groups that are working there, international organizations, they had a very limited, or maybe we can listen up to what we're hearing. We're hearing families. I don't know if we have sound for that. Yeah. Okay, we're seeing, this is Israeli television showing how the families are watching this on television, obviously relieved to see that their loved ones are on their way out of the Gaza Strip after more than 15 months of concern for them, of them being hostage. They weren't certain that these women were still alive, and now they've seen them. They've seen that they're standing and walking and in good health. So that's great news for them. Of course, when they'll reach the Israeli army and then their families, they'll be able to talk and to talk about what they've been through, which is obviously a situation that's extremely difficult. And now we're seeing these families of hostages and their supporters waiting for their return. They've been protesting every week, pushing for the Israeli government to accept a deal, which is, of course, complicated, but they're pushing for it, saying that, many of them saying that the war must end because they want all of the hostages to be released, and also the war to end because it's been so devastating for everyone, so many deaths and so many traumatized people. So yes, the families, we're seeing it's very quiet now, people waiting to see the hostages arriving, meeting with the Israeli army so they can see more footage of them and know what is happening. And we noticed that the images were very different from last week, the swap, because last week there was a lot of tension. The women who were released seemed extremely concerned. They were surrounded by armed men. It was a very different image from what we saw today. Hamas organizing this in a way where we could see them standing on the stage and actually smiling, part of this, something that is probably a PR for Hamas, because these women just wanted to return home for all these months and were held captive with others. But yes, different images, and now everyone hoping that this will help the process move forward for more releases and for the war to end for good.
But there's still quite a lot of, anger directed at Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, isn't there? I mean, what's the public opinion like in Israel at the moment? This has been dragging on for far too long. These, loved ones, the families of the hostages, but also normal Israeli citizens. They've been very vocal. They've been, as you said, protesting almost weekly, calling for the hostages to be returned home. I mean, what's the sentiment in Israel like at the moment?
There is indeed anger with many people saying that this could have been completed months and months ago. Many people looking at the deal that was offered by Joe Biden in May, saying it seemed pretty similar to what was offered this time. But the Israeli government says that it's not the same deal, that they will be able to keep the Gaza Strip under control. But yes, basically many people saying that the Israeli government and the Israeli prime minister has been a little bit hesitant for this deal, not just to fight Hamas, but also because he didn't want to lose his far-right allies in the government, the ones who have given him a majority and the possibility to remain in power. And they, of course, are against this deal. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, they're still against this deal. One has left the majority, the other one is still there, but pushing to get something in exchange for this. Initially, he said he hoped to build settlements in the north of Gaza to restart this occupation of the Gaza Strip, not just a military war, but also people going to live there, Israelis going to live there. And now the Americans have pushed for this deal for the Israeli army to leave. And Bezalel Smotrich says that he got something in exchange. He got a massive operation in Jenin, which is the next phase, he said. So yes, basically the war is still not over, but many Israelis, yes, pushing for this to end. It's very traumatizing, very difficult. Of course, obviously, it's very traumatizing for Gazans who have been seeing their territory devastated, but the Israelis as well. But some do share right-wing positions, far-right positions as well, believing that if Israel does not destroy Hamas, they believe it's possible to destroy Hamas, and that if Hamas is not destroyed and if its prisoners are released, well, then other attacks will be carried out later along. So there is some kind of division in the public